Okay guys, welcome to the Beginners Handbook, episode something, I think. I'm Jordan.
I'm Jamie, and it is episode something because we've been nowhere near an editing room, so we've got no idea what episode we're actually on.
Yes, in terms of numbers, but we do know the topic for this episode is going to be getting started running your first game in D&D.
So this is going to be primarily focused on D&D. We're not really going to be talking about any other games, any other systems. So if you've seen the previous episode where we talk about how to start playing a game, you're going to spot some similarities, but in this one we're going to go into a bit more depth.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, most of the stuff we'll really be looking at with this, there will be crossover like Jamie's saying, but I think the most important thing about it is we're going to be focusing a bit more on the details of how you can get started running your first game, because it's something that it takes it can be a bit nerve-wracking if you're not used to it, especially if it's strangers. I know for one of our pals when we first ran it was tentatively asked about it and we were totally up for playing it. But we've got everything that we think, at least in our experience, would be enough for people to run games, and we've tried this as well with like somebody I know, one of my pals who's just started running games. We gave him this sort of guidance. I did when I spoke to him, that is, and it was enough for him, and he had a blast. He didn't know what he was doing for most of it, but that's not really the point, and they had a great time and the guys loved it. So yeah, I think it's worth then just jumping straight in, just to get in with, is there a game, Jamie, that you've actually played that you thought was really good? Is there like one of your favourite games or one that particularly stands out to you? And if so, why do you think that is?
A particular game, as in a particular campaign from a particular system, is that what you mean? Or...
Yeah, I would probably say, because we're focusing around D&D, although it doesn't strictly need to be D&D, but from any campaign, is there a game that stands out that you've went, oh, that was a good time, and you're not allowed to say your own one, that doesn't count, the one that you've done with the James Bond stuff?
I wouldn't say that anyway, because it was abysmal. Again, if you've seen a previous episode, you'll know why.
We'll put that in the description for this episode so people can hear the disappointment in your voice when you spoke about it.
Yeah, compilation video, just of all the size that I made. Probably the campaign that we're still doing just now, because it's the kind of the first sort of long-term one that we've done, and rather than any one particular element that's jumping out from it, it's just the journey that's happened and how each thing's linked and followed on, and the fact that it's kind of a saga rather than everything that we'd pretty much done to that point had been something short, something that was, one game, 3 games, whatever it was. It was all relatively kind of compressed and sort of playtime, whereas in this, because it's still going on, it's been going on for is that 2 years coming up now?
It's past, I think it was closer to 2.5, and I think it's approaching 3, because I think it was July or something that we started it 1 year. Anyway, it's a long time, that's for sure. We never thought we'd ever play a game that lasted more than 4 sessions. And
and I think that's why it's memorable. It's kind of not quite, I think, what you were asking, because you're asking about particular things, but because currently for us that's kind of a unique thing, that's why that's still jumping out. But in 6 months' time, that might not be the same answer. But what about you? What jumps out for you? Again, you can't pick your own stuff.
Well, that's a shame, because I've had a couple of good ones recently. Not like just that I've played in and stuff. It's a good question. There was one, I was speaking to the guy that, so just in case you've not seen it or heard some of the other stuff, episodes that we've done, a campaign we're referring to is a long form campaign that we've been doing for a long time, and I think it's probably one of the actually, I think we've not played a lot of D&D campaigns per se, like bigger ones with that particular group, but that was one. It was maybe the first few where that came up, and now it's just became a huge ordeal. I think probably one of my favourites is favourites recently is one that somebody I know ran. It was actually the guy that was speaking about earlier who ran his first game, and I think for me it kind of took me back. Basically, it was a game around fighting. He wanted to have backstory for his character in a campaign that I'm running for them. So he was like, I would love to do one. He wants to impress a couple of people, and there was a special guest that was showing up. I won't go into the details, but somebody who really wanted to be there was there, and he'd made it basically to fill out his backstory and kind of explore his character a bit more. He put tons of work into making a game for us, and it was a total. It was a shambles, but I don't mean it was run like a shambles. It was just complete pandemonium the whole time. And I think for me what was a lot of fun actually was seeing, especially because this is guys that their first game they ever played, a couple of them had been looking to play for a couple of years. And he picked up the torch, so to speak, and normally I'm sitting at this end of the table just to my left, and I've got the DM screen up and I'm running the game. So it was funny sitting at the opposite side of the table at one of these games here that I usually run, but it was pure madness the whole thing. And I think for me what made it so much fun was actually, although sure there was rules that when they really followed and stuff, we're not really that bothered about that stuff with those guys at least, but I think for me what made it a lot of fun is some of the stuff that we're going to speak about, and it's actually about, we were all involved with that kind of process in the run-up to actually running the game, but there was a big focus on fun, and it was something that, we knew it would be a one-shot and stuff, so while it wasn't a long-form campaign, we knew it was going to be a fun game, so we could take risks, and that was kind of engaging the players beforehand, because the guy was good at it. He kind of spoke to us all beforehand, let us know what sort of game it would be, and he let us know it's going to be one game. I'm not looking to try and make 7, out of this. And he just tied in a lot of stuff, and while it's technically their characters that he, including his own, that he brought into this game, and I don't have one in that because I run a game. I nicked the dwarf character from the game that we play with the guys, so I just used that, and he fed in a lot of that kind of backstory or elements to bring him into it. But because he was tying threads up into his story, it just made it a lot of fun, and it was great just to see someone come in and just have fun with it. For me, it's important that people just have fun and go nuts with it, because it certainly was nuts. People screaming around this table. I think the neighbours must have been going, what the hell is going on in there? At 2 a.m, people are screaming because of nat 20s and nat 1s and all that. But yeah, I'd say that's probably my favourite recently. I've got plenty that I've enjoyed though, and like the dwarf campaign that we've been doing longer term. There's specific games in that have been good as well, but you've covered that a lot, where you've talked about it being a longer form campaign, and for me there was a lot of inbuilt kind of just excitement or buy-in or whatever you want to call it, because we've been playing these guys for ages, and it was like big apexes of what we were doing. But in terms of an individual game, especially one that was a one shot, I would say the one that somebody I knew was playing. But yeah, so I think that will kind of touch on some of the stuff we'll basically come up to, and that's what do you need. And speaking about my pal actually that done his first game, what is it you need to know is for actually running a game. I'm actually wondering, before we even jump into the topics, is there anything when you ran your first game, is there anything that you wish you knew in terms of advice, like if you were going to run your first game over again, and or tell yourself when you were running I think the spy game was the first one you done, is there any advice you would give yourself for it, just out of curiosity, just a highlight so to speak?
No matter how prepared you think you are, you're not going to be prepared. Again, if you'd seen me talk about that before, then you'll know that it was technology that didn't work as it was supposed to, and that totally threw me off. I lost my rhythm, and blah blah blah, another story for another day or a previous episode. So we won't go into detail with that, but even if you think it's okay if something goes horribly wrong, I'll still be able to keep my stride and go and do that. You might not. You might be surprised at what can throw you off and how easily you can be thrown off. So no matter how prepared you are, you might not be prepared enough, and you see, just accepting that before you happen, and before it happens rather, and just knowing that just keep the momentum going as best you can, and whatever's going to happen is going to happen, and at the end of it, just know that there'll be another time that you can improve, practice, whatever way you want to look at it, and then eventually things will just click, things will just go into a rhythm, and everything should be fine from that point. But that's the main thing. I thought I was totally prepared. I thought no matter what would happen, I'd be fine, I'd breeze through it. But something I never thought was going to happen happened, and all the preparation went out the window, basically.
I think as well, that's something I don't know how long I've run some of these games or how many I've run, but I find myself usually going back to that, like, God, why did I prep so much for this? Because usually what happens is you could prep a whole bunch of stuff and you could fill it with the greatest detail, and it's like the first decision anyone would just take a left field turn, and then they're like, okay, I need to completely wing an entire new game tonight.
Yeah, that's the thing, sitting there pretending that everything that happens from that point forward has been pre-planned, rather than you're sitting, the hamster's going so fast in the wheel that it's fell off,
Yeah, it's funny that I think as well, because that's something that I would definitely I back that as well, because what I find with preparing, there gets to a point, it's good to prepare, don't get me wrong, it's worth doing if you're really comfortable with like winging it, and I do that quite a lot. So with games, just depending on what happens, so usually I'll maybe have a handful of notes for like a full game, so a full session, and usually even those aren't followed, but they're just enough kickstarts just to go. I find with your own games you can get away with that, but I find once you've done that prep you might want to do more detail. It just depends on what you're like, but I find the more you prep, you start to get to a threshold where the prep becomes worry because there's so much details you've got, and you almost put yourself into like a space where you've got so much information in your head, but it becomes hard to run, and you lose actually as a DM. It becomes harder to relax because there's so much that you need to try and get crammed in a game and things like that. I think the bit of advice I would give maybe would actually be, there's a few, but I wonder if actually just to tie in with what we were saying there would actually be, it doesn't sound good to just say relax, but I think really my point with it is, one thing I used to worry about was games taking too long. And even it got to a point where my prep was reasonable. I wasn't spending hours prepping a game, but I always worried about getting things done, and I actually found it a lot more liberating when I get comfortable with just going, it'll take how long it's going to take, and if a one shot turns into 2 or 3 games, and usually a one shot that you've planned might not last longer than that, it's okay to break it away and just because what you do is you let the players have fun, and if it takes too long then that's okay, unless you're in a timed event, but you'll know that as a DM. That's like the first time that I ran a game for you guys ages ago, God, 4 years ago, 2017 or 18. So I think we started in 2017.
Even be earlier than that. I can't remember, but
it was a Call of Cthulhu game I'd run, but I was like, this is a one shot, and I'd put some prep in because the guy that we've been doing the long campaign with, his stuff is full of information and lore and names that I can't pronounce with 10 syllables. He put so much thought into it, so I was like, I've got to at least, I wasn't going to go that far with the details because I knew I wouldn't remember them, but I thought I need to put in a bit of work in because I need to step up a bit, and get pictures, and I hooked up a second monitor and stuff to put pictures on, and what a waste of time that was. I did not, I know it helped, but what happened was I just wanted to cram all this in, and I should have just relax. I wasn't nervous about running it, it was just I felt I had to get it done in one night, and I think we went for like 8 hours, and we start at like 8 o'clock at night or something, so I mean it went on to who knows when in the morning, and looking back I was just like, man, I should have just went, let's just make this week 2. It's okay, put a stopping point, and you'll find as well, you'll find it easier to run it as a DM if you do that, and just, I think even just being comfortable with the time it takes to do stuff within reason, and we'll come to maybe some of the things to watch out for as a DM either in this episode or another, But if you get comfortable with, as long as your players are having fun, if you're comfortable with that, you'll probably find your games, you're not as worried about it being a disaster, which I certainly felt like in that first game. It was a mess. I'm pretty sure one of the guys killed himself because it was like, good, okay, I'm going to kill myself, and he killed himself, and because it's Cthulhu, it was all brutal. Then he died, and he was like, oh, thank God. And I was like that too. So when we were done, I was like, oh, sorry it took so long, guys, but we're done. And we're like, yeah, let's go home.
Yeah, I remember that night.
Yep,
I think I remember it. Might just be, might be false memories.
The madness.
Could have been asleep. Might have been a dream.
Yeah, who knows? I've almost fell asleep at one bit because of how late it was getting. But yeah, so topics we're going to cover today. Then there's a couple just before we get into it. It'll be like what you're, at least for us, or for me, it's useful knowing your role's a DM. It's dead easy to break it down. You've got the equipment that you might want to have. We did cover that on our getting started as a player, but we'll cover some of the same stuff and maybe some caveats as a DM. We'll get things like finding players again. We've got commitment for your players and yourself. Rules in particular as a DM that you can. Spoiler: there's not a lot. I think you have to know to get started. I think there's a few that, as long as you know these, you can have a smooth game generally, and you can pick up some of the rules when people are discussing stuff around the table. Setting the tone is a good one.
Yep.
I'll maybe speak about that when we get there, because there's other games like Call of Cthulhu that you might have more uncomfortable content, whereas D&D probably won't, although you might. So it's worth discussing it. Creating characters and things with your players, and the story is pretty much, I think that's everything. Is there any comments you've got before we kind of jump in?
No, I think that's pretty much us good to go. Again, just another reminder that there might be a more condensed version of this that you might have seen or you might not have seen, so depending on what the answer to that is, then you might want to go look at it, or you might not want to go look at it, and hopefully we'll remember to include a link somewhere so you can find that easily. But just to add to what Jamie's saying there as well, there's actually quite a few things we're covering here, so there's maybe things, and we'll find out more maybe as we look at it in the future, but there's maybe topics within here like actually preparing your first game. Sure, we'll touch on things you need to know and maybe a bit of story development depending what sort of time we've got near the end of this, but there's definitely a good few episodes probably in story building and how do you build stories for one shots, longer medium campaigns, long campaigns, or campaigns that dip in loads of players. For example, you might have a pool of players switching in and out, so we'll focus on that in later videos. But I think let's just jump right into the first topic. Yeah, let's do that. So the first thing we're going to talk about is your role actually as a DM. So for kind of recapping for people that are totally new to this, DM stands for Dungeon Master. Long and the short of that is that's the person that's running the game. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is the DM being the keeper of the rules. So the best way I think to think about that is think about yourself as the referee. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're handing out red cards and putting people in sin bins or anything like that, but from time to time you're going to get a group of people that are going to, some of them are going to want to do one thing, some of them are going to want to do another thing, and you might be the voice in the middle of that steers them in the right path of what you're expecting them to do. And as well as that, people will want to do one thing, and just, you'll have people that are stubborn, you'll have people that are, and as well the opposite to that, you'll have people that are really, really flexible, that you might find that their ideas aren't necessarily getting brought to the front a lot. So it's, again, for me, and I don't know how much you agree with me in this, but for me, the way that I like to think about it is the referee of a game. And again, it's not to be dishing out disciplinaries here and there, punishment, but
sometimes you might.
Well, that's the thing, if that floats your boat, but I don't know how much you would agree with me in that.
I think really that is really what's going on, and I know the thing that you've got homebrew rules, and so half the time you'll find people break the rules and a whole bunch of other stuff, and some DMs will be more strict than others with rules, and I generally stick pretty close to the rules, but depending on what people do, I can usually if something super creative, you might not need to ask for a rule. There's plenty of stuff you can do, because it's actually important to keep the rules, because if you don't, just stuff goes a bit nuts. And I've had several games like where I did have to step in a bit and just say, guys, this, like, so it was about spellcasting. Spellcasting's got a bunch of caveats about it, especially when you multi-class and things. And there was a guy that he kept just complaining about it, and I get why. He had the power fantasy type character, big, strong, but could shoot magic as well. And
I want to do everything.
Yeah,
and I want to do it better than everyone.
Pretty much, and it meant that he wasn't that great. Now it's better now that he's a higher level, but at the time it was just, there was a thing about the rules keeping that, and we'll come on to what rules maybe you should know. But at the time it was like spellcasting was something, at least at multi-classing level and doing multiple spells in a turn and things. It was stuff that I wasn't even 100% familiar with because I'd never had to use it. But yeah, totally, Rule Keeper's one of them. But like we're saying, that doesn't mean you have to be like stick to the rules. And if you've got kind of homebrew rules, like we use one like potions being bonus actions, because we just see it's taking a chug, taking a shot. You don't need to spend the whole action doing it. So don't worry about being stuck in a rigid framework. With it. I think with the next bit, now I've mentioned this almost being like a partial storyteller, but it's not. You are the storyteller. You're like, on top of being the rule keeper, you're the kind of story keeper as well. And if you play Cthulhu, you're called the keeper of the secrets, and it's the same sort of idea. With the storytelling, you're setting the scene, you're really pushing it forward, and you're going to be the person that kind of needs to try and contain players within that world. But I say partial because you're the person setting all that and kind of adjudicating it, almost between trying to keep it not constrained, because you don't want to constrain players, but keep it consistent, but on top of making sure that the rules are complied with in whatever world you've built. But the reason I say partial is because I find the players a lot of the time are telling a lot of the story themselves, and giving them that option, I think, is quite a useful. It's fun. It makes it fun for me as a DM,
Yeah, and I'd agree with you that partial storyteller is probably the best way to describe a DM, and what you should, again, in my opinion, I think in your opinion as well, that you should aim towards. And again, the reason for that is if you stick to your story, then the danger is the game becomes rigid, and then the danger is that it's not fun for players, and it becomes very, very limited, because a player, as we often punish our most frequent DM, I think, we always end up taking the alternate route, the scenic route, to get to a place, and I don't just mean through some woods or anything like that. It's always the thing that is never planned out, and it takes it in a detour, and
every time.
Yeah, and the thing is, for us as players, we think it's great because we're doing what we want, and there isn't any barriers, there's no restrictions, so we're all happy. And then for, again, the guy that's our most frequent DM, what it means for him is that it's kind of keeping him on his toes, and I don't necessarily think he enjoys it all the time, but I think more often than not he enjoys it from the point of view of he never thought of us coming up with a solution to a problem or whatever it is, that then the next time when he writes something for us to work our way through, that he's then got another piece of our kind of toolkit for puzzling things out, which then increases the challenge for us, and on and on that goes in a cycle.
Yeah, totally. And I can hear the comments or the screams at the screens or the other end of whatever platform you're listening to this
DMs on, that have to deal with people like us, do you mean?
Sort of, but also been like, what do you mean partial storyteller? Because I need to narrate, flaming everything. And totally, it's not that you won't be the person basically doing everything. For me, what's most important about when you're doing it is really you're the narrative giver, so. But when it comes to actually the hardline story, if you want a more narrative and honed in linear story, then fine, you will be the person that you have to make sure people follow that story. Fair enough. But I think a lot of the time, certainly the games that I've enjoyed the most as player and as DM have been the ones that actually the players, whether knowingly or not, they've actually been just as much the storytellers as much as I am. I'm more just taking what they give me and then framing it in a way that it weaves into a narrative. Just to give an example, there was a one shot I ran for the guys I mentioned earlier, who one of them ran the first game not too long ago. I started that off as just to give them a test of D&D to see if they even would be interested. I'd done a one shot game, and the way it ended in a way that no one else had ended it, and I was like, well, I didn't expect that. Like most, I usually say that at the end of every game, but in particular with these guys, they're like, oh yeah, that was fun. So when's the next one? And I went, oh crap, I never expected. One, that, but two, because of the way that they'd altered things and really had the story unfolding, it meant that while I'm the storyteller, they're the people that are giving me the next stepping blocks for that story. So it becomes more maybe better than partial storyteller, it's collaborative storyteller is maybe a better phrase. But yeah, and that's now became a game. It's almost been a year we've played that. It's actually crazy to think. And that's all because of how the guys played it. And you know, if I ran it the way I wanted to run it, there would have been a hard ending. Do you know what I mean? If I just told the linear story, and sure they would have enjoyed it and they would have had fun, but we would have moved into something different. But now the guys have got characters they really enjoy. They've taken forward for almost a year. They've went up 5 levels, I think, since then, or 7 actually, because it was level 1. But yeah, I think that's really for me. You're the rule keeper, but also the collaborative storyteller.
Yeah,
that's for me anyway. And then there's a third thing we've got kind of noted down.
Yeah, and again, I think that's probably a better name for it, the collaborative storyteller. And a terrible example before we move on to the next point is that if you go on a plane, you know, and if you're going wherever you're going travelling, if you ask your average person, you know, how are you getting from A to B, they'll go, well, the pilot, they fly the plane, but the pilot is there and they operate the plane, but ultimately it's the airline company that picks the route, the airline company that sold the tickets, and then you've got the different people that are in air traffic control that tell the plane when they have permission to take off, what height they have to fly at, and at what point they have to then talk to the next group of air traffic controllers, who then repeat the instructions. So the pilot is following the instructions of other people. They're just there to operate the plane and get it from A to B based on what other people have said. And that, again, is a terrible example, but that's kind of what the DM's there to do. They're there to make everything run smooth and get from A to B.
Yeah, pretty much. And I mean, it's like if, let's say, a pilot's landing, you know, they don't just land because they need to land, they might need to swoop back up again and do a second turn. But that's just, you know, that's the players, and that's when the air traffic control go, oh god, here we go again. You know, just like a DM. I never thought I would compare a DM with an air traffic control guy, but there we go. I like that.
Yeah, hopefully there's no nervous flyers amongst whoever's watching this.
I know.
Fingers crossed.
Yep. I think then the last thing that I've kind of thought about for DM, so you've got the rule keeper, you've got the collaborative storyteller, but for me the last thing that your role is really, in my experience at least, is you're the person that's you're the fun facilitator, you're the guy that wants to make sure everyone's having a good time. But that actually kind of ties into the first 2 points, you know, you want the rules to make sure, you know, you don't want to, as a DM, you can introduce rules in a way that doesn't make the game mechanically heavy. I've played games with guys that will introduce all the rules at the beginning of a game, and then it's like, okay, let's go, and then if you don't remember them from a 20-minute download, and that's a quick one, it's like they get annoyed at you, you know. So, but it's worth bearing in mind, you're really there to let the players have fun, but don't forget that you need to have fun too, you know. And for me that's a big part of it. So really it's just when you're looking at being that rule keeper and the storyteller as part of your role, it's always just worth, I think for me, the fun part of it and facilitating all of that. It's more the framing aspect for me. That's the kind of the wrap around bubble, just to make sure, just look at it from that lens. That's why that game, that one shot, became a year long and still continuing campaign, because it was more about what are they enjoying, and not once have they they've done one shots and stuff whenever I've not been about, or if I just needed a break or whatever, but they're raring to go, every time we meet up, especially because there's drinks involved, so it's usually crazy fun. But yeah, anyway, I don't know if there's anything else you want to say about that.
Yeah, no, just pretty much what you've said there, and again, making sure it's fun. It does tie in with the previous points that you're in charge of the rules, but you're also in charge of how many of the rules appear and how strictly they're followed, and you need to figure out what kind of players you've got. Do they want a serious game, a more relaxed game, whatever it so happens to be, and also the times where rules should be broken in order to keep, again, whether it's momentum or fun or a particular plot that the players are wanting to drive, or whatever it is. And again, the collaborative storyteller, the partial storyteller, that is as much about what the players think as what you think, but also that doesn't mean that, although we're saying this, that if a player wants to jump in a rowboat and go across the other side of the lake into a dense forest where there's nothing for 200 miles, it doesn't necessarily mean that when they go down to look for the rowboat that there aren't any rowboats, so that they stay in the city that they are and go on and do whatever story arc it is that you've got planned out. So it's, again, like most things, finding the balance between the two.
Yeah, I think then, just to kind of wrap up this section, what you've said, and it's maybe something worth going into detail in a different episode, so I won't bog this one down with it, but actually, whenever you are technically breaking rules or something to that effect, what I've found is, especially because you're the storyteller, and this is where it became partial and now collaborative, I've had quite a lot of times where you have to rein it in a bit, because the guys want to go and blow up the mage's tower, and it's like, no, you guys are going to last maybe half a turn before, half a round of combat before you're all melted. I mean, they're low enough level to be put to sleep instantly, so it's like, there's ways that, as long as whatever you're doing fits narratively, and you can kind of weave that in, and you can really tell that story, you're almost actually negotiating with players, but you're doing it narratively. And I find if you do need to either break rules or constrain people slightly, as long as you're telling it in a story or narrative fashion, and as long as it makes sense, people tend to just be like, cool, and then they'll never notice that you maybe didn't roll the damage for a spell that was 10 times what their hit points are. I hit somebody with disintegrate and then checked out how many hit points that thing does, and it's like 10d6 plus 40, and I'm like, oh crap, I've never seen disintegrate before, and it would have instant killed a character, because once you hit 0 with disintegrate, you turn into, you disintegrate, and there's no death saves, man. So I just went, that was just my poor prep in that side, so I didn't punish the guy for it, but I'd done it narratively. I changed it from what he thought was disintegrate to something more just like energy or some nonsense, but it worked, But yeah, I think that's it for this section. I think, do you want to introduce and let us know what the next one is?
Yes, the next one that we'll be talking about, or the next thing we'll be talking about, is equipment. So with equipment, again, if you've seen the previous episode, then we've covered this in our thoughts on your bare minimum sets of different things that you need to get started. So we'll be kind of quickly going over a couple of bits here, but we'll then go into a little bit more detail with a couple of things and give a couple of examples of. So you need dice, obviously, to play. So you as the DM, you definitely need a set of dice, and again, you can make sure that that one set is shared amongst players if you're just starting and you've got limited kit, limited budget as well, if that's something that's constraining you. There's apps for dice as well, you can go and you can find them. But if you've got, again, another terrible example, if you've got 4 sets of dice but you've got 8 players, try and make sure that there's one set of dice per 2 players. Again, seems dead obvious, but if you do that, it then means that things are going to click and things are going to flow faster and quicker, and it should be efficient, and it means that you're getting on with the important stuff, which is the story and everybody having fun, rather than, oh, can I borrow this, can I borrow that? Because it might not seem a lot, but every time you need to stop to ask, to borrow, to this, to that, whatever, that's adding on, even if it's just 30 seconds of time. The amount of rolling that you do within, you know, a 5-10 minute period, that could be an extra 2 or 3 minutes added on every single time that this is happening. So that's just a wee quick point to look out for. Rule books as well.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I think one thing is almost tying in as your role as a DM, but one thing you are going to be, we don't need to go into details with it, because you'll probably know this already if you're listening and ran a game, but you're also the organiser. So that means that even if you didn't have dice, although what we'd recommend is dice and rule books, that would be things like, which if you've not heard it yet, check out the other episode of Getting Started Playing D&D, because we cover it in more detail. But things like getting quick start guides, you could bite the bullet and actually buy handbooks. And I think if you're really first getting started and you're committed to buying a handbook, just start with the player's handbook. That's probably the best one, and the rest is, I personally haven't really used the DM's guide at all. I've used it a bit, but I've not used it much. So that's an investment you can make when you're happy making it. But for sure, I think really your players don't technically need the player's handbook, because again, you're like the rules adjudicator almost. So you can weave that into your games, what the rules are like, and just get people into it first and then tell them the rules. But anyway, I'd say definitely player's handbook would be important. But if you're not sure, I think the quick start guide, the free or starting rules that you get on D&D Beyond and Wizards of the Coast's website, I think it's like over 100 pages, and it's huge, and it's completely free, and it's full of like actual properly, it's not just somebody's half-assed Google Doc that they've just published. It's actually really good looking. So that would definitely be the place to start before you do your first game. And if you're keen after running your first game or before running it, definitely I'd get the player's handbook.
Yeah, I think out of everything there, it's the best handbook to go for first, because ultimately in it you do get some monsters and things in the back of it, albeit basic, and you've got enough of the rules. Well, you've got the rules for the players, but then the flip side to that is, as the DM, because you know the rules that the players have, you know what they are working with, and then you know what you can work around. And things like again, travel in a boat or travel in a car or anything like that, realistically you don't need to know the rules from D&D 100% for that, as long as narratively speaking you're going, well, it makes sense that village that's a mile away, you can get to that well within a day on a horse, rather than it takes you 4 days and 3 hours to get there. Well, realistically that you can walk a mile in 10-15 minutes, whatever, however quick you walk. So as long as you're kind of being sensible with a lot of things, it'll all make sense, it'll all be fine, and the game will work.
Kind of goes back to narrative. Even to travel when it does take 4 days, I tend not, who cares? I mean, the guys aren't that interested in rolling a dice for survival checks at the end of each day and then doing some random table encounter. They might want to, and I might throw that in if depending on time of the game, and if I know I'm going to finish soon, I might do that, so they don't end it in a down note. They might end it after a fight or at the start of a fight, and it keeps them hooked. But yeah, totally, that's the rules. I would probably say as well, I think anything you're going to be doing, it's worth, people will be looking to you as that guidance. So definitely if you're going to be running a game for people that will have none of the rules and are completely fresh, it's probably worth you maybe investing a wee bit of time looking at the free rule set on Wizards of the Coast. And I would probably recommend the Player's Handbook at that point, because you're going to get a lot of use out of it. I've mentioned scrap paper because I'll tell you something, you're going to be using scrap paper. The trees are dying. I've tried doing this digitally, but what tends to happen is you've got all your notes, you've got all the player characters if it's digital on an app or something, or on D&D Beyond or one of these other platforms. But I've always got a wee notepad for hit dice and ACs for monsters that have come up, just to kind of keep on top of it. And it's worth having that for maps. If you want to do an impromptu map, you don't have to use maps. You can narratively theatre of the mind it, which means just not, you're just using descriptors and things to describe what's going on. But as well, I do kind of wee notepads. I give players scrap for, if I get inspiration, they can note that down. It's just a wee bit extra there. I would probably say, we'll come on to props in a sec, but with apps, it's worth finding out what apps you would be comfortable with if players, let's say they weren't buying players handbooks or character sheets. It's worth looking into what you could recommend your players to get. Like for the guys I mentioned earlier, their first game, I just went, by the way, check out this app. You can use D&D Beyond, but that's a bit more limited unless you've purchased stuff on it. But here's also the 5e Companion, it's called. It's on Google Play and Android as well. But I sent that to them as a link and said, have a go and tell me what you think. They're like, looks good. But that was them being given all the resources they needed to get started and make a guy. So I found that particularly useful. Any comments before we do props?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've pretty much summed it up. I would say though that trees might be dying, but you can recycle paper. Doesn't all need to be that bad,
Yeah.
There's a positive side somewhere. But yeah, paper is, for me personally, much handier than electronic things, because you're going, right, well, I don't need to worry about battery running out, I don't need to lock and unlock something and then footer that way. And again, it's quicker to have a scribble rather than sit and type and autocorrect and delete and refill and whatever else. And with paper you can draw and write, whereas with whatever app or whatever it is you're using, you might not have that facility built into that, and to flick between the two might be a bit of a pain. So just got a paper, have it there. If you don't use it, you don't use it, no big deal. Take it away with you, leave it in your friend's house, whatever.
It's good for names.
Again,
we've used it for names a lot. Drew character portraits for the guys one time, just when they were faffing about doing something silly. I think they were shouting at somebody that was in a tavern, so I was like, I'll quite like do it. It's more for me, so I knew what they were. One of the guys peered over the screen, and I just
naughty.
There was nothing. We had an introduction, and I think it took them 2 hours because they were having fun engaging. They went, what's that? And I went, do you know what, here's a good idea. So I propped it on the DM screen so they could see their characters, and it was in kind of positions that they were sitting in. So they found there's plenty you can do with it. You can get quite creative.
Yeah, and again, apps, just like you're saying, there's plenty of things out there that'll help keep track of things, and they'll do whatever it is you can think of. Chances are there's an app for that. So not much to say in that. But props.
Yeah, props. This is purely optional, but I find sometimes when I'm running games, and I don't always do it, I've got like 2 little models. They're somewhere upstairs. But there's a couple models I was given, just like it was a bullywug and gnolls, which is like hyena type guys for people. Bullywugs are like wee frog people. So you don't need to go and buy little models and stuff, but what I've got for I find when you've got props, and I don't mean like you need a dragon statue, but I find to kind of reward players, you might give them a wee prop. One of the things I've got is a Jackie Chan, God, I can't remember the name of it. Anyway, it's Jackie Chan themed cartoon that was around when we were kids.
The prop talismans that was it through a magazine you got them?
Yeah, Jackie Chan Adventures, I think it was called.
That was the name of the show. Disappointingly, I found out later on in my adult life that he never actually done the voice for it.
Jackie Chan. Shocking.
I was really sad about that. And then you watch it back as an adult and you go, oh yeah, that's definitely not him.
It's not even close.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I had the talismans for props for inspiration, because I found the guys with frequently, I'm saying the guys I mentioned, frequently, especially as new players, kept forgetting they had inspiration. I would usually give them it for free just at the start, just so they knew they had a reroll and stuff, but they'd forget. So, and at the end, if you've not used it, you lose it. So I was giving out talismans, and for them it was like they were going, oh crap, that's awesome, like went and then they would use it and they'd cash it in almost.
Yeah.
If you've got anything like that, you don't need to go and buy stuff, but if you've got something lying around, then it's worth just maybe thinking, how could you maybe use it in a game? It makes it fun. The guys seem to, people love handouts.
Yeah, and this is kind of this is kind of coming back to this in a sort of roundabout way. I think it was Twitter. I was scrolling through and then I seen somebody talking about when they were a student and they were playing D&D, and I laughed a lot at this. And what their DM would do, and this is when they were students at university or whatever it was, so they're all away from home basically, and struggling to budget and work and study and all that sort of thing, living off of ramen noodles or whatever it was they were doing. And what the DM would do is, for the different monsters or people that they encountered, he got like a big bag of sweets basically and would put them down. And if you killed that enemy, you got to eat the sweet. So loads of hungry students, they all loved it. And then what he would do for like a boss, your big guy at the end, out would go a ginormous donut that would be there, and everybody would be so totally engaged with that.
That's funny.
And
I
would
like
be
that.
desperate to land the final blow because they were all desperate for the donut.
I have no idea why I've never tried that. That's actually because we eat at a table on Friday nights and stuff. But the other thing we do as well when people chug potions is they take a shot of stuff. But they don't have enough potions to get them out their face. But I mean, but it's a reward, and I'm now considering doing it for when they kill characters, because that would make the game a lot more interesting and unmanageable for me. But
yeah. So again, it doesn't necessarily seem like a prop, but a donut works.
It's a creative way, and it goes back to the whole fun, facilitating fun as a DM. It's about, sure, you might be doing a serious game, so maybe tweak your props appropriately, but ultimately you want people to have fun, even if it is a serious game, and that's a brilliant way to do it. I actually really like that, so I'll be using that. But yeah, I think that's it for the equipment. I don't think there's anything else. If there's anything in particular that's maybe more detailed, we'll probably cover it in another episode. But I think the next thing then, which touches on stuff we spoke about in the getting started with playing D&D, we'll be looking at finding players.
So when you're looking for players, you've got a couple of things to be dealing with. Again, we went over, I think, pretty much most of this in a previous episode, so again we'll try and remember to link that in for you. So you've got kind of two things really, which is for you as the DM, which is to find players or find a group of players, and then where you can actually go and where you can and look for them. So you've got the actual search for them, and then when you do find potential players, figuring out if they're going to fit in with you personally or your existing group or the kind of group that you're trying to bring together. So again, first thing is actually finding people in the first place, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I think we covered a lot of the more specific details. We won't kind of drone over the same stuff, but I think because it's different getting started playing it, but when you're running it, it's a different dynamic you've got, and you find that people, one of the games that I ran, I wasn't like I was looking for players, but some of my pals had said, "Oh, you play D&D? I want to try it." It was actually called Cthulhu, but it's the same approach. So, but they'll be like, really what you need to do is, I mean, there's probably even in your own friend group, assuming you've already got friends, because I think we covered that in the last episode. Yeah. But it's like, even just suggesting, hey, do you guys want to play? Don't be worried about it. People will probably say no, or they might say aye, and then they don't show up, which you're going to get a lot too. But I think really, one of the things that I find is if you're really struggling to find players, going to like a local comic shop and just saying, if they've got a D&D night, for example, if you just go in and say, I want to kind of run a game, and you'll probably find that they would quite like someone to run a game, because half the time you get people swinging in and out, that it's they're looking for games, and sometimes people turned away because there's not an available either staff member or DM that will be willing to take somebody in. But yeah, that's a good way to do it as well. But like, assuming you've got friends, it's really just about bringing people in. And I think, to be honest, I think other than what we've covered already, I kind of don't want to drone on too much. The other way to do it would be as well as if you're part of any Facebook groups or Discord groups, and just say I'm interested in running a game. I've played an Alien RPG, which I've played once and really enjoyed it and not had the chance to play again since. But that was purely just some guy on Discord saying, I'm thinking of running Alien, is anyone interested? And I was like, sure. And it turns out I knew the guy. Well, I knew him through someone else, but I never recognised his name. And this is somebody I'd met 2 years prior. And I was like, what are the chances of that? But
Alien Slayer 216.
Yeah, 269. But yeah, it was just, he just went, guys, I'm looking around in the game, who's interested? And it was a bunch of strangers. I would say if you're going to do it with strangers, it's probably worth getting a couple of casual games under your belt, because you don't know what the strangers will be like. But that will be a topic for another time. Running game for strangers, because I've had interesting experiences that would be worth sharing in terms of how to handle it, what to look out for and stuff.
And I mean, that's the thing, if you can get a group of people that you already know, excuse me, so if it's friends, family, whatever.
Family's a good one.
Again, the group that people forget about, I think, probably, because it's always...
That was who got me into playing these games. Not D&D, but role-playing games.
And again, that's the thing, so you've came into it from literally, well, not the opposite, because family and friends aren't opposite, but you've came into it from a different point from me. So that's, again, something to talk about in the future, so I won't dwell too much on it. But if you get a group of people that you trust, that are there, that are looking out for you, then you know that when you start playing it, that you're not under any extra pressure. You hopefully you've got family and friends that are supportive, so that you're not getting stressed out doing it, and you're not too nervous and things like that. But that's the best way of doing it. And then the random route, but at the same point, if there's nobody there, nobody's interested, again, a comic shop's a good shout, because you've got hopefully a group of like-minded people, and the people that are running the comic shop, they are they want people to be coming back, so they're not going to be they're not going to be just letting anybody do it. They're not going to be letting anybody get left out, or this or that, whatever other negative reason you want to throw in there. So that's probably, I would say, your next best place to look for, and then maybe after that something electronic, because again, in the virtual world, the scope for variation is so huge that you just don't really know what you're going to get. But at the same point, if you're in the middle of Alaska somewhere and it's you and nobody else, then that might be the best option for you. So you just need to figure that one out for yourself, really.
I mean, I think really that kind of covers the finding players, but if all else fails, refer to getting started playing D&D, because really if you find someone else's game, at least if you can't find someone to run a game for right now, at least if you played a couple of games and started there, at least that'll be a group that I'm sure you've probably built some sort of relationship with, that's like you're comfortable around them at that point. And you can always just suggest it to a group, or even if you've been playing long term and you've not kind of jumped into running a game, just ask them. I think that would be the last one to cover the rest of those, I think. I would say so. In our Discord, will we put a looking for section? In the LFG, a looking for group channel would be quite good. We could put that in there, so it's definitely worth checking us out on Discord at Beginners Handbook #, and the numbers will be put in the description, because I've got no idea what the numbers are off the top of my head, because you have that wee code at the end of Discord channels. Again, we'll remember to link that somewhere, so future us editing this, do that please. Or there's also an invite code, you don't even need that, so we can do that and put that in the description. But cool, I think that wraps up the finding players then. So the next section, Jamie, is
commitment. So commitment, although we started off this episode talking about the fact that we are playing a campaign which has been done over a 2-3 year period or whatever it's been, it doesn't mean that that's what you need to do. And with commitment, there's different parts of it. There's what you're prepared to do as the DM, there's what your players are prepared to do, and as well as that, people think of commitment as being that you need to turn up, every single week at whatever time, all the time. Not necessarily the case. You could commit to doing something every single week, but half the players there make it, half don't, and then sometimes you've got a small group, a big group, and that varies. But to me personally speaking, if somebody before you start anything turns around and tells you that they can only do once every 2 weeks, once every month, whatever, but any time that you go to do that game they are there, then they are miles more committed to me than somebody who turns up, they agree to do it every week and they turn up 3 out of 4 times over a month. The person that's turning up exactly when and where they say they will, they're getting the gold star.
You're talking about me there, aren't you, with our weekly games of the Dwarf campaign?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't like to point fingers or anything, but there's just some of us that are more committed.
Yeah, Jamie has touched upon, I think for me, commitment is something for me that's part of building a story as well, but that's something that we'll maybe mention it when we get to talking about the story later in this episode, but when we actually do story, that's something that you unintentionally might not think about in terms of what sort of game are you building. I'll give it an example after, just in a minute. But I think, like Jamie's saying, I think especially if you're getting started running a game, do not try and run a big epic game that's going to last a year long, because I'll tell you something, you're probably going to look back on it and go, I didn't actually enjoy it that much. It's maybe not, but I find if you start off with a one shot, then you'll know, you'll start to find your style. I find as well, it's good to agree what sort of time it is, but it's also worth, there's some people that I've ran with recently, and they were initially not wanting to get into D&D because of the commitment it would have been for them. So it isn't even just showing up to games, it's the actual monetary commitment and the knowledge and study commitment. As a DM, you're going to be doing that for them or with them, you're going to be collaborating with them, as we keep kind of talking about. But certainly as well, it's worth knowing about the characters players' commitments to their characters, and that's something that if it's just a one shot, some people might not care about the character creation process. By the way, I play a lot of games as well, so I'm not that interested in making custom backstory filled characters every time, So if you're running a game for new players that they're not that interested in the creation process, ask them, would you want to sit down and do a building a character session together, which we'll come into shortly as well. But alternatively, if they're not interested, maybe not interested, but just would prefer to be given something, then there's plenty of ways that you can give that to them without them needing to commit all that time. I think Jamie's really covered the things about every 2 weeks, every week, 2 weeks, once a month. I think most importantly, it's about building it for your players and knowing if they're not going to show up all the time, that's okay, and if they're okay with you continuing, that's also good. I think that's really important, to be honest, as well, because you find some people feel guilty showing up, and we're adults, most of us are adults. Some people listening might not be, but I think that's important. I think probably the main things as well, I would probably say, is when if you've got a schedule, if you want, let's say you've ran a few games and you want to now have something more regular, even if it's not loads of campaigns, and you're wanting to try out your first set of games you've ever run, you want to do that once a month, definitely it's one of these things, you can get the buy-in from people before, do they want to be there every week, would they be comfortable continuing with one person down, or if 2 or 3 people are down out of a group of 5, then don't bother. You know, it's worth just sounding that out with folk, because it helps, and because that reassures players as well that they're not committing to something that they have to be there every week, and it becomes work more than play. I mean, I've had that just with running loads of games in a week. There was one week there was a month I was running like 5 or 6 a week. I mean, you're speaking about 5 or 6 every week, and sure that a couple of them were mini games, and I was doing it for, there was us, I was playing with yourselves, doing the D&D on Monday nights. I was doing 2 for family, and then I had some pals that were wanting to start out in Cthulhu. So 5 most of the time. There was one week it was 6, it was 5 the rest of them. But I mean, that meant I was doing 2 hour sessions. Our sessions are longer than that, but you know, it was 2 hours. Time commitment's a good one to bring up. Say a game will last 2 to 3 or 4 hours, depending what you want. Just to give an example of commitment and how I've approached it personally, we knew that we'd do we thought we'd have a longer campaign. It's just when you would want to do it every week, and over COVID as well, that's when we started it, so we knew we could commit to that every week. And that's brilliant. Whereas some of the guys that I've been running with recently, we knew that because of people's night shift patterns, there were maybe 4 on, 4 off, that's weeks. So they might be in for 4 Fridays in a month. We might not see or them for another 4, but depending on other people's night shift patterns, you're maybe looking at 6 weeks between games or 8 weeks. But we were okay with that, and we've actually been, most of the time we've all showed up. There's been one game in that whole, I mean, I've been playing for a year, it doesn't mean we've played every week for a year, but out of all those games we've played, and there's a good there's a lot, there's been one night somebody couldn't show up, but it's because we built it around them, and I've assured them that you know, if we wanted to pause stuff, that's okay, and we've had that commitment early. I think for me that kind of summarises what I wanted to say about this, but have you?
I mean, you've hit a lot of things right there. Again, people think commitment, they think time, they think showing up, and they think showing up all the time rather than financial commitment, like you've said, and you know, other bits and pieces. And again, it's a kind of not a point that we've particularly dwelled on, but a lot of things that become issues can be so easily avoided if communication is good. So at the start, when you're working out commitment, going, right, okay, person A can only turn up once every 2 weeks, but everybody else can turn up every week. So, right, do we want to play every week and accept that person A will only be there for half of the time, or do we want to rein back the schedule, make it every 2 weeks, then everybody's all on the same board? Talk to everybody and figure out what suits and what's best, because you know, you might find that you end up with some form of solution you weren't necessarily expecting. And again, like I said, like if you've got a group of players that are in your schedule to be there all the time, but somebody can't be there all the time, but they've turned up for every single session, whereas your other group that are turning up, your other person in that group is turning up, you know, they say they can turn up once a week, but they're only there 90% of the time. You know, they're there you know, most weeks, but occasionally they're missing it. But this other person that told you at the start that they couldn't be there every week, but every time they said they would be there, they've been there, then the danger is that they feel like they're not as committed, when in actual fact they're hitting 100%, they're hitting their 100%, whereas you've got other people that could be hitting 100% that aren't. So that's one to kind of watch out for. If you've got a group that's got kind of complex kind of scheduling stuff going on, make sure the person that can't make it as much as everybody else in terms of how many times they turn up, make sure that they're not feeling on the outside of the loop because they're feeling that they're not committing as much as everybody else is. And use that point if you need to, if you're finding maybe there's a bit of tension creeping in or whatever. You know, if that person who says they can only be there once every 2 weeks is there once every 2 weeks, they've got 100% attendance. Whereas if you're a person that says that they can turn up every week but is only there 3 out of 4 times, well, they're only on 75%. But I mean, you've pretty much ticked all the boxes anyway with that.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that even with around especially the end of the year, you find that games get all over the place. It's like even with our stuff, I'm showing up to every couple. It's just that this stuff gets in the way, you know, and the thing is everybody's totally fine with it, you know. But that's the thing, and we're talking about like the attendance and things like that as well. That's something that if you set it at the start, like, it's not, you can say that, you know, if people are, you'll find who's more interested and who isn't, and you'll find that, you know, sure, if people agree to what time they want to commit and things, that's fine, but you'll find that the more you play, the people that are interested in being there will make it as much as they can. That doesn't mean people that make it less aren't interested, they just might have other things going on. But you'll learn how to be able to schedule and manage basically that time and facilitate it for people that will show up basically, and that will keep consistent and fun games. But anyway, so I think that's I think that's us for that section. So if we want to move on to, we won't go too boring because it might get covered in a later video, but it's rules and what to focus on.
So with rules, like we've kind of talked about earlier on, there's going to be times where you're going to be bending them, there's going to be times when you're just going to be outright breaking them, and then there'll be times where you just completely ignore them. There might be times when you forget about them, and you know, every other variation of that in between. But what we'll do is we'll go over some of the more frequently used ones. I think that's the best place to start. Give a little bit of time to them, because again, in previous videos or podcasts, if you're listening to this, that we talked about the rules, but we talked about it very, very in general, like what we've just done there, which is, you know, times you need to ignore the rules, you know, and very, very general things. So the first thing that we'll talk about is skill checks. So anytime you want to do something, that is going to be a skill check, and that is to see whether you successfully complete a task or whether you don't. Now there's lots and lots of different ways for rolling things, for doing things, or for events that happen. And when, I know for me anyway, at the start, the difference between a skill check and a save and throw kind of threw me for a while, because I was going, right, so you roll the same dice, but you use this number in this column, but not this number in that column. But how come that number's the same as that number? But if we're doing this over here, it's different. And there was lots of different things going on. But the easiest way to kind of differentiate between skill check and save and throw, as an example, skill check, you want to do something, whereas a save and throw, something is about to happen to you. More often than not, it's not very good, but that's the difference between the two. And a lot of the kind of confusion can go away if you look at what's written in front of you. For example, a skill check, that is checking a skill that you have. A save and throw, something is about to happen, and this is to see if you save your own skin. If you kind of think about it like that, that will help steer you out of a lot of kind of debates, confusion, time sitting looking at a sheet, scratching your head and all that sort of stuff. But right, how do you do a skill check? Let's start there.
So what, actually, do you know what, it's just the way you were talking about it there, it makes me go, I like that you've mentioned the saving throws, because that's something I actually don't think I put in. It's not. Because I think for me, when you're running games,
it's okay, nobody can see the screen, don't say that.
It's alright, you'll find out more about saving throws.
Let's pretend we know what we're talking about. Come on.
It's alright. I mean, I think when you're starting to run a game, for me the question is, because I was like, where the hell did I start with D&D? Because I was just a percentile based stuff because of Call of Cthulhu and things, and like touching skill checks is like, you're going to be throwing skill checks and they'll be coming at your ears sometimes, you know. But for me, the main ones would be skill checks, known combat, you've got contested rolls. I would be adding saving throws in there too. going down and dying effectively, and then I think that's about the main rules you'd need to check. We've covered things like skill checks, but really Jamie summarised it pretty good there. You know, anything that is a skill, that it takes, you don't need to throw it out for everything. But if you're just going to go, oh, I want to climb something that's really high, and it might take a wee bit of skill to do, you go skill check acrobatics. You know, and you'll notice, well, I won't bog down too many details here, but you'll notice next to each skill, so acrobatics, athletics, you'll get history, religion, blah blah blah, and all this stuff. You'll see next to them in brackets it will say what characteristic it's related to.
What attribute,
I attribute. And basically the plus, if you've got an attribute of 20, that's a +5, and you'll see it in the big box, it says +5, and you'd notice that any skills relating to intelligence that you've got at 20, you'll see that all of those should have 5 next to it, and then you get proficiencies along that as well. But yeah, skill checks, they're super easy, and basically you pass and fail them, and you pass and fail them, but it's up to you. If somebody doesn't fail real bad at getting that one, you might want to do degrees of failure and stuff. That's up to you though. I think really when it comes to the rules to focus on, it's worth actually just making your mind up about it after reading the rules, the Player's Handbook or the Quick Start rules. So that would be things like the skill checks. Combat's one would be really important, just to make sure you know how to do turn order and decide how you're going to do initiative. There's plenty of ways of doing it. Sometimes people just do it clockwise around the table. That's okay. There's rolling initiative, which is in the Player's Handbook. It's fine. That's just you roll your dice and you see who gets highest effectively. But and some people do initiative at the beginning of each turn, which actually I kind of like that, but for bigger games it's a bit of a pain.
Again, can kind of bog things down and slow things down a bit too much, whereas if you have, again, whatever way you do it, whether it's clockwise, anti-clockwise, or
standard
whether
initiative,
you roll it using the regular method, that order stays that order, and then you just work through it in a loop, and then once you're back to the start you work through it again, and you know, that's it.
Yeah, I mean, the combat's not that bad, but the details of it, it's worth just going and checking when you've got those rules, because I mean, there could be an episode on combat and how to make combat engaging. I mean, that could be a whole episode there, because it's not just initiative order that makes it. There's things that can change initiative. You get layer actions, you've got legendary actions, you've got a whole bunch of stuff. But definitely, if you're looking into rules, skill checks, and combat, contested rules is one that I think I've probably pulled from Call of Cthulhu, to be honest. But that would be if you're doing 2 strength checks against each other. I mean, to be honest though, if you know how to do a skill check, then or a skill check versus a saving throw, but probably 2 skill checks, like if you've got 2 characters arm wrestling, that's 2 strength checks, you know. And I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. If you know how to do a skill check, then you just make 2 people do it at the same time, and you pick the best one and they win basically. So that's about it with contested roles, but it's worth checking to see if you're going to be putting that in your games. I think going down in death is a big one, and it's worth not shying away from death, and maybe part of the commitment that we spoke about earlier for your games, and especially story, when we get to that, is how lenient are you going to be with people dying, you know. I had a game 2 weeks ago where one of the guys couldn't make it. It was 2 weeks ago, and I said it was a pretty rough moment. It was after a huge difficult fight. They'd just initiated another fight accidentally. They were all drained of spell slots. Their divine smites were screwed up. There were hardly any spell slots left for that too. And I was like, these guys could die. And like more than one of them, all of them could die. And one of the guys said he couldn't make it, and everyone else was desperate to play because we knew we wouldn't meet for another month or 2. So we went ahead. But you know, the thing is, it's worth just knowing how does going down work. Effectively, just once you go down, you're on death saves. You're basically wanting above 10, you're passing. Below 10, you're failing, and you just tick that off. I think I don't know if I can't remember if, because I think there's some homebrew for it. I think nat 20 gets you straight up with 1 hit point. That's nice. And nat 1 kills you, or it's 2 death saves, because I've seen people play it both ways. Can't quite remember, but up to you. It depends how punishing you want to be, and that one in an insta death might upset some new players, but you're the DM, it's up, you can decide. But check out those rules if you're looking at getting started running the game, just in case it happens. It probably won't in their first ever game, but you never know, you might be surprised.
Again, again, kind of jumping back a wee bit to communication as well, that and again, you don't need to go through every single rule before you start a game and go, right, okay, so I'm going to tweak this one here, I'm going to keep that one the same, I'm going to complete, you don't need to sit and go through it like that.
Yep.
But before a situation occurs, so for example, if somebody is about to drop down, and rather than starting the process of rolling death saves and all that sort of thing, explain to the players how it works and what you're doing, if it's anything away from the standard rules in the book, so that then everybody knows where they are, so that then when the dice start rolling, nobody feels like things have been bent or things have been tweaked to either, again, punish them, which is what sometimes people can think if they're a bit upset and they're not thinking rationally, or that that you've been too lenient with them and then they feel a bit cheated that they've not been given the full impact to the game. So that little bit of communication beforehand helps. So again, whether it's death saves or whether it's a contested strength roll, if you're doing something a bit different there or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's actually good. I've got something here about characters and immunities and stuff. We'll maybe cover that in the next point, because that's around building characters. But yeah, totally, I think the death thing's interesting. So what I tend to do is actually wait until their turn when they're doing the first death save, because they're going, I'm down, what the hell, am I dead? And one of the things I did 2 weeks ago, when the guy that didn't make it, he asked how it went. I've not told him. No one's told him.
In suspense.
Everybody's had a very silence, and I said, I'll tell you who went down first. Now that doesn't mean who died. It's because you get downed and then you get dead. And he was like, oh, who was it? And I said it was this guy, and he's like, oh my god. And I told him he was next, because he was. But they're all alive, unbelievably. But yeah, the thing is, it builds that suspense. But it's up to you. I mean, some people prefer to kind of preface things before they happen, kind of set the scene by and let people know some rules. For me, I tend to just to do it on the moment, because people say, what do I do? And that's usually a good prompt. And listen to your players if they say that and explain it, And really, as long as you know these kind of 4 main rules, which are skill checks, combat, contested rules if you do them, but I mean, the same as skill checks. Going down in death, I would probably say spellcast in there as well, but you can check out the stuff for that, because we could go for ages with that. But as long as you know those main things, you've got, even just skill checks alone, you've got more than enough, or skill checks and combat, you've got more than enough to run a game with just those two. Saving throws, sure. The way Jamie actually separated the two, saving your skin is a good way to think, is that a saving throw or not? Or if you're saving your own skin, or if somebody needs to dodge something to save their skin, like a lightning bolt, then it's a saving throw. I do not recommend throwing lightning bolts at low level people, because I did that for my first ever D&D game, and I checked the damage and I went, this would insta kill the 3 guys it hit, because it was like crazy damage. I was like, whoops. But you live and you learn. Or they didn't, they died, because I was sticking to the rules in that one. So I just thought, well, it's a one shot anyway, guys.
Well, it's in the book, sorry.
Yeah. But they were quite happy, they were delighted. But yeah, so I think the other thing we've mentioned, we've spoke about things like focusing on rules. We've mentioned bending the rules already, and just to kind of just quickly just reiterate it, you'll find that sometimes you might, like I've mentioned for the disintegrate, I'd never seen it before, so I had no idea, and I wasn't killing a character completely, and this is a character that's been played for almost a year. I'm not killing them because I didn't do that bit of research, because I never thought it would come up. So I bent the rules slightly just to make sure, and I know for the future, if I hit him with disintegrate again, he's gonna turn to dust if he gets hit with it again. But because I just felt it might have just been a bit of too much of a surprise.
But this time it'll be on purpose.
Well, exactly, yeah. I don't mind purposely destroying somebody, but yeah, and I think the core thing with bending the rules, I would just, especially for your first time, just try and stick not as close as you can to the rules. And if you're bending them, just make sure it's narratively, it makes sense. Like, don't just go, don't just like make it up and say, oh, you got I can't think of an example off the top of my head, so never mind. But if you are breaking the rules, and it might be obvious, have it narrative. If somebody has been hit with a lightning bolt and you don't want them to die instantly, like 3 of my characters did one time, Thankfully that was the boss fight though, so it was a bit more forgiving, the fact that I'd killed them like that, or they were forgiving I should say. But let's say you made a mistake like I did, you could just maybe not roll the damage and just narratively make something up, have a NPC interrupt what's going on, as long as it's narrative in there to kind of make the rule break or bend make sense, people will know, they just won't notice, and that's fine. It's better to have that.
Yeah, and
I think that's it from me.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. The rules are there to give a structure, and as to how loose that is, it's up to you. But when it gets to the point that you're almost contradicting yourself from a previous occasion, that's when you can start getting into some sketchy ground. So just try being nice and consistent with what you're doing, and don't kind of break the realms of your reality that you've made with it.
That's a good point actually. Consistency is super important, and actually an example of breaking the rules would be somebody jumping up something that would be way too high for them to jump up, but things like that, there's ways that you can narratively make that make sense. If a gnome's jumping up a 10-foot wall, maybe they wouldn't be able to do it, but I'm sure there's ways you could put footholes in there. But consistency is important. I think when as soon as you've set a sort of rule, and if you homebrew a rule and you want to try something different, even in your first game, just keep that, at least for the time being, and just tell players at the start, I'm going to try some different things, which I tend to do with new players in potions, especially if there's any rule sticklers in there. I say this is how it'll be, because I think people need to spend a whole action taking a potion. It's just it's a bit boring, But I think consistency is important.
Yeah, that's the thing. Just if you're nice and consistent, it avoids a lot of hassle further down the line. And if you are going to be inconsistent, explain why, or at that point go right, okay, I know this is what we've done before, but here's the reason I'm changing it. Just give the people the reason, and 9 times out of 10 that'll be fine. Whereas if you just randomly spring it on them, 9 times out of 10 they're either going to feel this is unfair, but this happened to me but not them, or they're just going to be really confused as to what's going on. And if they're a new player, it's potentially going to set them back, because then they're going, oh no, I've been doing this wrong, and they're going to start overthinking things, and it's going to, again, not put them in the best position.
Actually, also to add to that as well, especially because it's your first game, you're probably going to make some of these mistakes, and that's fine, because I had this happen first time I had the guys that I played with for their first times, and I didn't do a lot of, I didn't bother with backstories too much. I just said go make one and just put what you want for now, and because we're doing one game, and that was it. So I was like, it's fine, just put what you want. If we need to revise anything, that's fine. But one of the guys felt like the rug was pulled from under him a bit, because he basically said, yeah, my family owns all these lands in this one shot. I'm like, no, because that doesn't work for the one shot, and I said that sort of stuff's quite impactful. And the thing is, he doesn't know, and fair enough, he wants to play his Skyrim character inside D&D, fair enough, and people do have that sort of inclination as well. But I just said, after it was during one of the breaks, I just kind of explained it to him, so if it does, don't worry yourself too much. And if somebody it does get all kind of, if you apologise to them, if you explain it and they still sit there and pout about it, then just let them sit and sour about it, because worst case scenario, what's going to happen, they're not going to show up, but it's like, oh, who cares, it's fine. But you'll work it out. So
and
okay.
Then very quickly for rules before we move on, so to do a skill check, you take your 20-sided dice, D20, you roll that, whatever number it lands on, you then add the modifier. So if you have, like Jordan was saying, if you've got a 20 for the skill, that then gets you a +5 modifier, and then you add that +5 to your roll. So in other words, if you roll the 5, add your +5, you get a 10. The same happens with your saving throws, except this time you're not adding your modifier from your skill, you're adding the modifier from the saving throws, which are in a separate section in the character sheet. So again, exactly the same way that you do that. For combat, slightly different. You'll roll your D20, and then you'll add a modifier to that, but that'll be down where you've got your weapons listed, or if it's spells, it works in a similar way but slightly different. You'll need to read the instruction of each individual spell to figure out what you need to do there. Then after you've rolled, you then figure out whether you hit or you miss. If you miss, nothing happens, you missed. Pretty simple, straightforward. If you do hit, then you then roll the weapon's damage, which is again a different set of dice that you'll need to check per weapon. And then other than that, when it comes to rolling and things, like Jordan said, there's death saving throws, and then they're different. You don't add the modifier to that even though it's a saving throw, and again you just mark that up. In general, any roll that you'll be making is probably going to be with a d20, and then if you've got a different set of situations excuse me, then you'll be using potentially another set of dice.
Yeah, pretty much the exception to the D20 is damage. Well, at least there's sometimes others, but that's really the main thing. So yeah, I think that's it about that then. So do you want to move on to characters then, building characters in the story?
Yeah, let's do it.
Cool. Okay, so I think depending, we'll see. Maybe we might do an episode around building characters, although it might not be. It'll be less about like the steps involved and probably more around the discussion around that. I'm not sure. But story as well is definitely one that I'm really keen for sure on going into in a lot of detail. So what we'll do is we'll cover. I mean, really what we've covered is like what your role is as a DM, the equipment, finding players, what the commitment is for you and players that you've got at the table, rules that we recommend, and finally what we'd like to wrap up with is actually creating characters and stories.
And again, like you're saying, there's so much involved with creating a character, and then with coming up with a story, there's a lot of things involved with that as well. So they'll be discussed in more detail in future episodes. So if you want to hear about that, make sure that you're all, linked up with subscriptions and notifications and all that
follows
sort of stuff.
And things like that.
That sort of stuff. And again, you can keep an eye out on social media and other places for updates as to what's happening. But I think what we're going to do just now is we're going to kind of quickly go over sort of tips for when you do get around to making characters, or when you do get around to writing a story, the kind of things that are going to help you as a DM get through that. It sounds pretty ominous, doesn't it?
Get through it, yeah. Yeah, definitely. We'll stick to highlights because there's episodes we'll be able to do that will go into the detail, but as well you'll find your own style of making stories. The way I do it will be different from you and different from the guy that's running the Dwarf campaign and things. But so I would say when it comes to creating characters, and I don't even mean the NPCs, I mean the PCs, so the players that your characters are playing.
And just quickly, if you're new, NPC is a non-player character. In other words, that is not a character that your players are going to be playing, strangely enough. PC, player character, that is a character that your players are playing.
Yep, absolutely. And the thing with it will be, I think if you're doing it for the first time, especially if you also have new people, I would say in particular if you've got new people or you've got a particular type of story you would like to do, I find a session 0, which we'll come to in a second, is a good option. So session 0, I tend to either find that be just a character creation process with everybody around the table that's going to play either the one shot of the campaign, or sometimes you can squeeze in, if people come prepared, you can kind of squeeze in a little introductory, just short thing.
This is how characters A, B and C first met and became super pals and saved the world.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, for that, I think really session 0 is worth considering. I tend not to do them with the exception of maybe if there's completely new players, because it can feel daunting, and at least I can help them out, because I've done it long enough. But that's for sure. I think as well, if you're not sure So let's say you've either opted for people to go and make their characters if they're comfortable doing it, or you're doing a session 0 to make it. That's where the character creation process will kick in for you guys. Alternatively though, what you can do if you have a specific game in mind is there might be some people that aren't interested in making characters. So what I tend to do is, even with any game that I'm going to run, I tend to have 3 or 4 characters that I'll generate that I can give to people. So if I'm running a game at a local comic shop and the guys come over and say, can you have a new player? He's building a character. We'll ask him to build a character for you. I can be like, it's alright, I've got like 4 that are sitting.
Yeah.
Just
pick a sheet.
Sheet. Pick one. What sort of guy do you want? An archer? Oh, I don't have one of those, so you can go this guy instead. But
you just take this and like it.
I just shut up, roll a D4.
It's actually just 5 sheets with the same character on it.
Yeah,
you just slide in it.
Yeah, I mean, some people like getting given a guide just to pick something up and run with, and I'm quite like that myself. So definitely just either do a session 0 once you've done a couple character creations on your own and you're comfortable helping people through that. Session 0, or offer or pre-generate some guys and offer them to people as well. Some people might be less committed to making a guy, so you're skipping the quote unquote boring bit for them. If you're not that comfortable making a whole bunch of new characters and stuff, there's stuff like fastcharacter.com that you just literally put in the fields that you want to have a barbarian at level 3, a Duragard race, whatever. I say you can basically build that and it will give you the sheet, and that's you done. Now, the reason I had those specific things actually come into my mind...
it sounded very familiar.
Yeah, and that was actually unintentional, believe it or not. But yeah, that's exactly how a character that I've been playing for like 3 years came up. He's now my favourite guy. I thought he would be dead within two episodes or 2 games. But yeah, so I think that's it about making the characters with players. So either go for session 0 and or... have some optional characters that you've maybe pre-generated in advance of the game that you can give to people. For the most part, if you're not doing it, if you want people to go away and make stuff, just get in touch with them. How's the character going? Can you send me the sheet and just make sure you're happy with it? I think that's about it for me there.
And again, that's the thing there that Jordan's just touched on at the end there, and make sure that you're happy with it. Again, I think we briefly talked over this in one of the previous episodes when we were kind of going over everything you need, that make sure the character fits the narrative. Don't worry about telling people that doesn't work, but also don't feel the need that because they've came up with this, that you're going to somehow tweak it to get it to fit. You need to do whatever's going to be right for the story, otherwise it's not going to work, because everybody's going to be scratching their head as to why there's a Gatling gun in the middle of a kind of medieval Europe type setting that you've got planned. So make sure it works. Like Jordan's saying, if you want them to go away, if you want to give them a bit of independence, just check in with them every now and then, see how things are going, but make sure you know what they're doing before they turn up for the game. Otherwise it's going to derail things and it's going to create some issues. So get that all sorted before they turn up. But on the flip side, that's why the session 0s are good, because if you're all there, then you're all talking about ideas and you're all getting things sorted all there together, and you can be offering that advice for tweaking things or whatever it's going to end up being right there and then, before things go, you've not heard from them in 2 weeks and then they come back with this character that doesn't fit, and then they're upset that you're asking them to tweak some things. But again, communication, just explain to them why you're asking for a tweak here and there, and 9 times out of 10 people are okay with it.
Yeah, totally. And the other thing, going back to the commitment thing we mentioned earlier, if you're going to be doing a one shot, it was like what I'd done, except it did turn into a campaign, so it's worth bearing what Jamie's saying in mind. If you do know it's going to be a one shot, I suppose you don't need some of the constraints. You can just basically let them do it, but make sure to tell them that if it goes any further, it might need revised. That's usually how I approach it, just in case, because after that experience with that guy that was a bit upset with the character stuff, when we started going wider into a bigger campaign, it was just better to let them know. If you know it's a one shot and you're not that bothered with somebody's crazy character that's actually totally game breaking, just let them know that you might reconsider in the future. So for now, but maybe later you'll change it. So I think that's it regarding actually the characters, and then for the story, this will definitely be something we go into in a lot more detail. But the main thing for me, and this might inform the players, the characters that you actually build as well. So one thing I would say straight off the bat, what tone are you trying to get? Is it spooky? Is it fun? Is it slapstick? Is it just schlocky, like some sort of 80s horror film type stuff? What's the tone? And actually see what, sometimes the best thing I try and do is say to the guys that I'll be running with, I go, what is it you would like to do if they've got a preference? Because that will help direct it. So definitely find out the tone that you would like to have. I'll come to this point in a minute actually, but what I would definitely say is if you're starting out, just keep it simple. And I mean, literally, if you have hit people with a mystery, have some sort of event and some sort of resolution, like the 3-act structure thing works pretty well for this. I mean, you can literally just have one event, 1 or 2 events will last more than one game, I find. If there's a bit of mystery in there, people will be engaging with the interpersonal stuff and collaborating with each other and trying to figure out what the hell do I do. So keep it simple. Just like the first game I did for a bunch of level 1s, I had to go and there was a missing gnome and it was trolls that had nicked him and stuff like that. But I mean, it wasn't that complicated. It was just go track the gnome. Oh, there's trolls. They tried to fight the trolls and got their ass kicked, but they managed to. They found a really creative and cool way to pull him out. But that took all night. And something that might take us now at the level we're at, it would take us half a night. But this took them almost a second session to do it. So definitely get a tone. Figure out, or keep it simple. So just give them one problem if you're not sure, and if you're really stuck, you could have a premise to go and do a quest, but in between something happens, and that probably, if you do that, that's 2 games you've got. If something just attacks them on the road, let's say. I always think it's good when they're doing the story, it's worth just making sure you don't over prep would be the main thing. Like we've touched on this a lot, that's why I don't want to go too much into it. Don't over prep. It's not like I'm saying, if I've got a missing gnome, they need to go and speak to, if you think about it, they need to talk to people in the town about the gnome, they need to try and track where the gnome might have been, they might spend a bit of time jumping about the forest, they will eventually find the gnome, and then they've got to figure out that there's trolls putting them in a pot for a chicken stew type thing. That's simple story. It's just go get this guy because trolls have got him. That's basically the summary. But that will take somebody 4 or 5 hours to do easily, especially if they're new. Yeah, and
touching on the not over prepping, again, talked about it in previous episodes with myself and one of my one shots that we done. I over prepped, but I never over prepped on the story. I over prepped on the technological aspect that I was bringing into the game. The reason I'd done that was because I was worried that the story that I had was a bit weak, and I worried kind of too much about the story, that I thought, oh, this'll save my neck, this'll get me out of trouble. Didn't happen. But that's basically where that came from. And I was worried that I didn't have enough content as well, was one of the other things. I thought, oh well, throw in a special effect here or there, go Michael Bay on it, and then that'll get me out of trouble. But it would have been handy if I had a story writing episode session laid out there and could have looked at that and things. But hindsight 2020, all that sort of stuff.
Well, that's for sure. And I think really the last thing I'd like to kind of cover with the story, because really I would say that if in doubt, there's plenty of free stories out there. There's plenty, and they're actually a lot of them, they might not sound that great, but you'll find that the players make them a lot of fun. Even something as simple as go get a gnome from a bunch of trolls doesn't sound that interesting. It might sound interesting, but the way that they played it made it was just laughing the whole time. I was kind of wanting them to kind of go, oh crap, we're actually a bit, because they wanted something really serious, and actually they thought it was hysterical, but they actually really enjoyed it, So there's plenty of free stuff out there, and just type in D&D scenarios and you'll get a bunch of free ones. Wizard of the Coast do some as well, I believe. But going back to building your own story, if you do opt for the ambitious option of building your own story for the first time you run one, I would actually, one of my favourite things to do is I start with the main event normally. So I start, and it was Sandy Peterson, who's the guy that is involved with Call of Cthulhu and stuff, he was the first person. I never had a way to kind of verbalise what I meant by that, but he's got a great breakdown of it. And he'll recommend starting with a movie scene. You know, I'd start with the main event, but it's the same thing. If there's a movie you like and want to replicate or theme your story after,
take inspiration from
it, grab an event, make it unique and interesting for you, and work backwards. How does all that happen? What's the opposing force that the people are going to come up against? What location is it in? Is it in a swampland that they need to get to that main event?
Yeah.
Or is it actually in the town because it's actually some political thing that's going on that's involving murders and magic and mischief? Starting with the end almost, or at least somewhere near the end where the apex of the story is going to be, great way to kind of give you inspiration and kind of fill in the details from there, because you'll find the players will more than likely see the main event, but the lead up to that they'll be going all over the place with it. So that's where it's usually best. Think of the main event first, build stuff around it, and that will help you build clues and all the interesting hooks that will get them interested in coming back.
Yeah.
But again, don't worry about it too much though. If you want to run a story, I would just, in terms even just for brevity, just grab a free one, and you'll get paid ones that are like 2 pages long. That's more than enough, and you might even find they'll last more than one game. But yeah, I think that's really it for me in terms of the story as well. So just to kind of wrap up there, get a tone, because that will help inform your story, or the characters that you'll be building with your players for that. You'll have one shots if you're not sure what to do that will cover it all. Keep it simple, please. Just keep it simple. Save yourself the sanity. Unlike Jamie and myself, who have suffered greatly at the expense of prepping and then just not our execution, but the execution of the tools that we were using causing us issues.
Yeah. The little voice that pops up, it goes, "Are you sure this isn't a bit much?" Listen to that voice. Listen to the voice that's trying to put the brakes on. Don't ignore it. Don't just
Yeah, definitely, and certainly if the players are new, one thing to do is just when you start the story. So let's say you've picked a theme, or you've taken inspiration from a movie and built a story from that, or you've grabbed a one shot. What to do is give them a wee introduction. Doesn't need to be huge, but introduce the characters to the setting, frame it, let them introduce each other, assuming they meet each other, and I'd recommend just having them all either know each other or just bumped into each other. And then from there, just let them lead the way, and that'll be it. I mean, it sounds super easy, and people might be going, "Oh, you've done it a lot, so it's easy." But when you run it, and I found when I peeled back everything and just stuck with a very skinny framework of like 6 points, I had one of the best Christmas games this year. It was just total pandemonium. It was like an Eldritch Santa came out and all that, and it was just a nightmare. And I basically didn't know what to do for a game because there was a special guest that had appeared that I knew wasn't going to be there again. So I just thought, well, they were going for this mine anyway. They were going to this deep underdark mine. So I went right in the middle. There's a blizzard. What the hell's going on? This is an unnatural blizzard. And then anyway, a bit of build up, and Santa was there. So that's kind of like the one shot. I wanted a showdown with Santa. That was my thing. I worked back from there. How does the setting work? Blizzards. Wait, why would a blizzard scare them? Well, because there's dead people everywhere and there's burst open presents. Why is it burst open presents, and why are they dead? You know, did the bodies come out of the presents? They had no idea. They came up with these crazy theories. But literally, I mean, what was 15 minutes of prep made a full night a game. But then I've done it a lot, so you know.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, like everything, the more you do something, the better you get at it, and the less time you need to put in to get the same result, because everything starts to become automatic, and as well as that, you get a better idea of what's working, what's not working, and if you're doing it for the same group of players, then you get an idea as well of what they like, what they don't like.
That's true.
As well as, right, if I put this clue in, they might miss that, whereas if I put this clue in, they're definitely going to go for it. And again, we'll go over more detail in the story writing episode and things, and how to use each of those kind of elements for different reasons, but
yeah, completely. And I'll tell you something, if you're putting combat in your game, you can literally dedicate half the night to it. If you get more than like a handful of creatures, man, you're going to... I think most of that Santa game was combat, and we were up to 3 a.m. or something doing it, you know. So, you know, just that's something to be aware of. But that's why a simple story works, because the combat will take time, and it probably is one of the most time-consuming parts of any game. But anyway, I think that's my kind of main things for creating the story and characters for that story. So I think, unless there's any other things you want to sign us off?
Yeah, I think that's pretty much everything that we've got for that episode. Again, with creating characters and story writing, definitely we'll have a more in-depth episode for each one of those. So again, if you want to see that, make sure you've got notifications and things on, subscribe, liked, followed, all that sort of stuff. And again, if anything that you've heard here you've thought was helpful or interesting, or you feel sorry for us, again, do those same things. But other than that, I think all that's left to say really is thanks for listening or watching, depending on where you are. You can get us on Facebook, Twitter, Discord, Instagram as well, and again on podcast platforms and on YouTube as well.
Yep, so guys, from me, thanks for watching. We're looking forward to hearing your thoughts and just providing more content. I think that's probably the thing we most enjoy, is when we get to see what people think, especially if people tell us that they don't agree either. That's interesting, because that brings up some great points. But so yeah, thanks from me.
Yeah, and thanks from me as well, and leave us a comment and let us know what you think.
Yeah, see ya.
Right.